good evening to you and welcome to this program of Rodney Groundings. I'm your host, Dion Abrams, and my guest this evening on the program is Dr. David Hines, and together we'll be talking about Guyana and the year 2017. Welcome to the program, Dr. Hines.
Thank you very much, Dion.
Well, it's Christmas time. I guess you would want to extend greetings to the Guyanese public on behalf of the Working People's Alliance. You have that opportunity to do so.
Yeah, on behalf of the WPA, I would like to extend Christmas greetings to Guyanese. Hope that this Christmas break will serve as a moment when, as the nation, we reflect on our condition. Of course, we're celebrating the birth of Jesus Christ, and the narrative is that Christ came to save the world. So he was born at a time when the world was in trouble, when the world was going through its own turmoil, and that his birth gave hope to the world at that time, and so we want to reflect on that. I always think about the irony of Christmas being a time when we don't talk about politics,
Okay.
you know. But the very birth of Christ was a political act. The story goes that when he was born, he was seen as a threat to King Herod, who then ordered that all little boys 2 years and younger be murdered. Jesus was born to poor people, carpenter, a woman who must have been a housewife. So his very birth brings into the forefront some very serious political issues.
Okay.
And I think sometimes we do ourselves a disservice in cutting politics out. I think we should cut a certain kind of politics out. But here we are, it's Christmas, and people take a break. We eat, we drink, we be merry. But as I always say, and as the Working People's Alliance would want you to do, is to reflect, because we have a year ahead of us before the next Christmas comes along. And if 2017 is anything to go by, I don't see how 2018 would be any better. But let us reflect, let us pray that the next year would be one that is less contentious, less acrimonious, and one in which, as a nation, we can reflect that goodwill towards men and women that Christ's birth reflected. Happy Merry Christmas to everyone, and I suppose by the time we talk again, it will be the new year. But Merry Christmas, season's greetings to everybody.
Well, of course, Christ made some political moves in terms of his acts in the synagogue and all of these things. The powers that be, as you mentioned, felt threatened by his action, despite he didn't intervene in, a direct political way. But we cannot separate the church from politics, because, as some would say, they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Church and state cannot be separated. And the church, in fact, has been in the seat of government in many
Yes, and
places around the world. They've influenced politics across the world. In fact, the decree by the Pope was one that was very contentious, resulting in the enslavement of millions of black people and all of that.
Yeah.
So,
But I tell you, Dion, one of the things about Christmas is the way in which it's grounded in a particular religion, Christianity, but it transcends Christianity.
yes, sir.
That people of all faith and all ethnic groups celebrate this religious holiday. So I think it's a remarkable thing, and I think I did my column for Christmas is every day should be Christmas Day.
Okay.
Because I think it's the one time of the year that, as Guyanese, despite all our chat about one people, one nation, one destiny, we are far from that, right? And I think it's the one time of the year that we come closest to letting down that ethnic guard and dealing with the moment, the Christmas moment, as a universal moment. There is no other time, not independence, not republic, not any of the other civic interventions, have we as a people really come closest to being a people who are not letting our ethnic identification or political identification come before us. So I think Christmas is remarkable in that sense. You know, the other thing about Christmas is that you know, there were people the other day who were breaking down the parliament and hollering for rape and carrying on in the parliament and all of those things. And today, tomorrow, this season, they'll be talking about goodwill towards men and women and so forth. I mean, these are the very people who are behaving in the most cantankerous way and so forth. And so perhaps Christmas is a time that brings sanity. And in that sense, it's very important. Or you look at them, everybody's going around sharing gifts to children. You know, every politician, you open the papers today, and tomorrow you're going to see all the politicians and the political parties sharing gifts to people. And perhaps it's good that children can see these politicians and see that they're human beings. Because if you go by what you see on the television and how they carry on in Parliament, I think children would probably came to the conclusion that they're not human beings. So when they go to share these toys and so on, at least children will get a chance to say, okay, so this is a human being. Right? So Christmas in a sense brings a kind of temporary humanization to our landscape, and let people, I mean, these are the very people who are going and sharing gifts to children, but who would vote against principles that have to do with the defense of children, you know? And so it's the kind of hypocrisy that you see. But nevertheless, it's here, we've got to deal with it, and so forth. So, you know, the children are seeing that they're human beings after all.
Well, I was going to ask you to reflect on the year, but since you've started at the bottom, then we can do what we call a flashback.
Yeah.
So you seem to have great misgivings about what transpired in Parliament. What is your take on where our Parliament is going in terms of the behavior of politicians?
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised, Dion. I think we have seen this coming. We neglect to accept that we are in a state of decay. You know, the poet Martin Carter, whose life we celebrated the other day, spoke about this decay in a lot of his poems. And I love Guyana, I love the Caribbean. It's what gave birth to me, what gave birth to you. And it's a place that gave birth to a lot of beauty. But there's a lot of ugliness that Guyana and the Caribbean have given birth to. And one of the ugliness is our inability to see when we are going down a track that is leading us to destruction. We see something else. It's really amazing in this country. And it happens in other countries, but we're talking here about Guyana. In a way in which the supporters of one party can see nothing, absolutely nothing wrong or negative that that party is doing. And the supporters of the other party see everything that is wrong about that party in government. When you are in a state like that, you are in the midst of madness. You know, our colleague, Sister Ndaye, you know, I visited with her during the week, and she drew my attention to the Stabrook News, what the people say, talking about the president's nomination or selection of the GCOM chair. And all the black people felt that, no, they were talking about what was going on in Parliament, sorry.
Okay.
And all the black people felt that the PPP was wrong, the speaker was right, and all the Indians felt that, that the speaker was right, that the PPP was wrong, and all the Indians felt the PPP was right. They focused on the police going into parliament and not on the bad behavior of the people in parliament. And so you have that kind of thing. What do you do in such a situation, right? There's no reason. There is no reason. There is a hunkering down. It's mindless, it's senseless, it's blind, and it can only lead to decay of the society. And so therefore, we should have seen it coming. What eventually happened there in Parliament, that dance of madness that you see, and that's what it is. Here is a group of people who lost power, but who believe in their hearts of hearts that power belongs to them. And they've not gotten used to the fact that they're not wielding power anymore. And so if they're not going to do that in a formal way, they are going to make sure that nobody else wields power. That's what you see there. And it's not the first time you've seen it. Let's be truthful to ourselves. Opposition parties have always behaved in a certain way in this country. Part of it has to do with this kind of system which we have, which locks out opposition from participation in parliament. But it also has to do with a feeling on the part of politicians that they can only function when they are wielding power. And perhaps the PPP, this bunch of PPP people, are the worst at it, but they're not the only ones. It has happened before, and it is going to happen again if the nation does not stand up and say, but you're wrong. Not only those who are behaving badly in parliament and wrong, but those who help to create the conditions for that behavior. And the conditions for that kind of behavior was created by all the political parties in this country. They should all take responsibility. It's not the PPP. The PPP are behaving in that terrible way, but the conditions that allow for that kind of behavior has been there all the time, and it's nurtured by all the political parties in this country.
You know, I saw a caricature of the parliamentary behavior, and in one, it's one of, I don't know who the artist is, but in one you have Ejil, massive and large, sitting on a small, he has a very small chair, right? Signifying that he is not the one really in the driving seat of this opposition party. A speaker says, sit. No, I am not doing it. And he's standing bold and big and strong. And the other half of the cartoon, you have Jack View in a big chair, and the speaker sit, and he's there sitting. He's obviously by his expression, he's perplexed and so on, but he's obeying.
Yeah.
So what drives Ejil to believe that he can be this person to take on the speaker and to carry on in that?
Diana, I'm going to say something that you know, I know, and that we don't always say. If you're African Guyanese in an Indian party, you want to show your Indian comrades that you earn your place among them.
Okay.
And to do that, you are going to be the pit bull against the other party that is perceived as being African. It's the kind of thing, you see it. It's been a long history of that the African faces in the PPP have always, over time, behaved in a certain kind of way. Not a lot. Maybe they've not behaved in the nasty way in which Mr. Ejil, Bishop Ejil, behaved, but they've always been pressured to prove
that they are worthy.
That you're worthy. Okay. And it happens on the other side, where you find East Indians on the other side who behave in that kind of way. And I'm glad you asked about that, because there is something that people are skirting around that I feel very strongly about. And that is this hollering for rape in the parliament. The racial and ethnic connotations of that are strong. And when it got into the parliament, it really gets to the core of where we are. We know, in America they call it dog whistle. I don't think we call it dog whistling. We call it what it is, which is racism. That the image of black men attacking Indian people, in particular Indian women, is something that is deep in the psyche of racial sentiment in this country. And to hear Indian lawmakers reduce themselves to that in the National Assembly really should alert this country of where we are. All right? Now, I don't want to condemn people. We do that all the time. We condemn people, call for their resignation, and it changes nothing. But I would like to alert the nation to the kind of racism that is just at the surface. It's not deep down. It's there. It's there. And it's what is animating people. So when we talk about how far we have come in terms of race, look at that. We haven't come very far. If Indian leaders in the parliament, in the public, is prepared to play that kind of racial card, it says to you where we are. And it's one of the reasons why things are not going to get better in this country until we really address that issue of race. You know, I get so frustrated sometimes with my liberal friends, especially liberal middle class friends, you know. They always say, well, you know, we've got to get rid of race. Race is, you know.
It's a magic thing.
You know, oh, it's the racial thing and so on. And I don't think that they pay close attention to how much that thing is part and parcel of the everyday thinking of our people in terms of politics. Now, that's not all we think about. All right? There are other, you know, biases in the society and prejudices in the society. But certainly when it comes to politics, the race thing is there. And we've got to treat it as a serious matter, not just wish it away or say that, well, you know, it's the politicians alone. Certainly the politicians take advantage of it. But the politicians themselves are recruited from the society. And they speak to that society. When whoever that minister is, holler for rape, the vast number of Indian Guyanese and African Guyanese know what he's saying. They know what he's saying. And I think we should be alerted to that. And the very fact that we're not even talking about it says a lot about this society. Because nobody wants to me. Tomorrow they're going to say, oh, they don't want David Hines gone with the race thing. The man just all in rape. You know, but race is meaning that is given to action. All right? That is, you look at you and you say, your color as a particular meaning. When I see you coming, I think of violence. I think of you coming to rape my women. You see? And that's what race is about. And that's what was at play there. And for me, that was the biggest lesson that one can take away from that drama in Parliament. And we're going to have more drama in Parliament. Because those people are prepared to bring this government down at all cost. All right? And they're going to use everything at their disposal. Now, the government is, as we would say, between a rock and a hard place. We have a government at a time when you can't behave in a certain way. Can't beat people on the streets now that they used to do under the PPP and under the previous PNC government. You can't haul people up protesting and put them in jail and so on. What we have is a government that has, by and large, stuck to the rule of law. And allow, well, not allow, they can't allow, but they certainly did not interfere, do not interfere with the right of citizens to protest. And the PPP is taking advantage of that. All right? That is, my point is, why carry on like that in Parliament? If all other doors of protest were closed, and the only door that was left open is in Parliament, I with you. As an old protest man, right? You old protest man, we come out of that tradition. But your people are outside protesting in front of Parliament. They're protesting every day. You have access to newspapers and the media. You're able to express yourself. And the society is not the kind of quote-unquote authoritarian society in the sense that it's coming down against protest yet. You're going to go into an institution like that.
And not the first time.
Not for the first time, and behave in that way. And that's my problem with that whole thing. I am not against protest. I'm not against using all forms of protest to get your word across. But you cannot and you should not be doing that kind of thing when you have other doors that are open to you.
Yeah, well, it's a debacle, and I don't know, because the first instance people talked about it, and then it went, instead of improving, it got worse.
Yeah.
On the second occasion. So we don't know what next they're going to plan to do, and we're hopeful that they come to understand that it's not acceptable behavior, and that they should, like you say, use the other avenues for protest. I mean, Jack Dio goes about, he has the leverage to go to speak to his people. I mean, he has promised them the world at Albion and so on, so that he's going to ensure that the sugar industry, the workers there are compensated and are kept alive by giving them monies from the government once he gets back in power. And he has these options that he can use. He's on Channel 28 whenever he feels like, and so he's not limited.
That's right.
In scope for getting his views out. I must say that I get a sense, maybe somebody might have spoken to him, but he had the arrogance that he would have brought from the presidency. That arrogance transcended his position in the opposition. But he's somewhat more temperate now in terms of how he addresses issues. Probably people were telling him that, look, boy, you're not the president anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
You understand?
Yeah. And so, this is, but Dion, and you're right. This is where responsible sections of the Indian Guyanese community are important.
Yeah.
All right? That in a sense you have to say to Mr. Jack, but you crossed the line.
Right.
If I tell him he crossed the line, if black people tell he crossed the line, he don't listen to us, because we are not his constituency. And it comes to our own role, somebody like yourself, somebody like myself, in terms of our side. People beat me, they beat people like you all the time when we are critical of this government without understanding the value. I mean, part of what, and I am going to say it now on national television, part of what I've been trying to do for the last decade or so is to try to contribute to an atmosphere where black people don't make ourselves fools in this country anymore. We've made ourselves fools in the past, in a sense that we participate in a certain kind of politics, and we're defined by that politics. The whole notion of rigging is tainted, has tainted not just the party, it has tainted the race. And part of what I try to do every day, they call me, a race man and a black nationalist. I am not interested in a kind of anti-Indian politics. I've never been part of that, and I have no place for that. What I'm interested in is that black people in this country be dignified. That is, they be treated with dignity, but also that they should act in dignified ways. You see, Mr. Jagdio has done a lot of negative things to the psyche of black people. His rule for those years from 1999 to 2015, because I included the Ramatari years, those years were injurious to black people. And it has left a certain kind of bitter taste in the mouths of black people. And I read some of the crude things they say about Jack Dio, and I bow my head in shame, because I know at some point Indian people are going to begin to say crude things about Granger, and black people won't like it. You see, we have to be very careful. Jack Dio and the PPP did wrong things, but we as black people have to be able to deal with those wrongs in a dignified way, and not to bring ourselves down to that undignified place. Because at some point, they're going to do what they do to our leader in Parliament, which is disrespect him. And it's the worst kind of disrespect. This man is the president. He's not talking at the corner of some place in Enmore or Albion or Port Morant or somewhere, and you're jeering him. He's in Parliament. He's there as the personification of the state. and yet you disrespect him in that manner. You disrespect.
And the other dignitaries that were there also.
Oh, also. And I think it's the worst kind of behavior that has all kinds of social and ethnic connotations, you know, because often these things are not as, they're not as innocent as they look. They're undertones and overtones. But I said to black people who object to that, but you all do the same thing to Jack Dio. We've got to come to this place where we're able to say to leaders, but you're wrong, without attacking their humanity and behaving in such disrespectful ways on both sides. You see? And so therefore, I just want to say that we have reached a point in this country where we've always not respected each other. Part of the problem with black people and Indian people in particular is that we don't respect the humanity of the other race. And there are times when we've worked in it, the Rodney period, there have been moments and so on, but this is the worst. This is the worst. I've seen it. I was a little boy in the 1960s when we had the riots and so on and so forth, and I read and I study and I talk to people all the time, and I'm feeling that same kind of thing now, and it's not good. 2018 has to be a year when we resolve that not to go there.
But you know, even though I have an account on Facebook, I refrain from commenting on political things, because as soon as you, whether objective or not, you know, it seems as though some people are simply there to take it down the road of racism. And you get a set of folks coming with this, and it's so disgusting. You don't see any objectivity in what they say. It's naked racism, and you wonder what really is going on in this country.
It's gone, and it leaves people like us in a bad place because we're neither fish nor fowl, right? And it leaves us in a bad place. I mean, you know, my column last week was that, you know, remembering Martin Carter's Guyana is Dying and talking about what's going on in the country. And a very educated young lady, very educated, works for the state. Our comment, and I suspect she didn't even read the column, but our comment is what wrong with this big man? Like, he know that he is part of the coalition? This is an educated person. What happened to this big man? He is part of the coalition. And I think somebody said, well, if you're part of the coalition, that don't mean that you're not. But that's it. This is not somebody riffraff on the street. This is a very, very educated person. And so what you're saying points to where we are as a country. Mm-hmm. You know, if I pass through Buxton and I hear them little boys and little girls carrying on, I approach it in a certain way, you know, because I understand their own limitations that the society has put on them. But when you're educated, this country spend money, send you away for study and things, and that's what you would say when someone takes the time to say, but let's take a look at our society and where we're going. That's what you're dealing with.
So, I mean, it transcends the ordinary folk, the educated. It's really deep, that something deep that we're talking about.
That's why I think, you know, Walter Rodney, in the 1970s, you were a little boy then, and you probably can't remember this, but I remember Rodney saying, I think at the corner of Cummins and Middle Street, one of those big meetings, and saying that one of the things he feared was what he called the Asianization of Guyanese society, meaning that we get to the point of Haiti, you see, they've battered Haiti so much that Haiti is there, it survives, but it's at the brink all the time. Something bad is always happening. It's never given a chance to move off the brink. And Rodney, 40 years ago, said he feared that Guyana would be there. And I have to say that I think that we are almost there. And this is not just about politicians. As, you know, Martin Carter himself said, men must murder men to build their shining castles, and so on and so forth. And so we understand that politicians be understood. But these are people who are enabling that kind of nastiness. That if you live in a society and you are not able to say to your leader, but boss man, you're wrong. Something with the society is dead. That you can't do that. You know, and that if you dare to do that, you are seen as the enemy. You know, we help to bring this government into power.
And we want it to stay there.
And we'll do everything that we can within reason to ensure that it remains in power and wins again. But if it's doing nonsense, my God, who best to tell them that they're doing nonsense than their own?
Because it affects us.
It affects us.
Right? I mean, we going back now. I mean, this one thing, the race situation. Last week, Hogan and I were talking about the signing bonus.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the most outrageous. And, I mean, it's something that really hurts you to the core.
Yeah.
I mean, you could never conceive that sensible people would do something like that.
That's right.
I mean, for how many months you were denying that, look, you never signed this thing, you never collected anything, and then when it's thrown in your face, someone in the parliament has the audacity to stand up and say that it's vindictiveness and somebody who wants to show the government in a bad light that let the letter leak out. It's the most stupid. I gotta get like Donald Trump. It's stupid. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you know, and they're not doing it because they're stupid. Even though it's stupidness, there is something that drives them. And as a political scientist, and you know, I'm not a magician,
okay,
right? But I think it's almost kind of a reflex that they have. That they don't feel that government business
is public business.
It's public business. It's ingrained in them. I mean, we know these people, and we know they're wonderful men and women. They're patriots. They mean well. They're not stupid. And so when they do something that you can only describe as stupidness, it has to be driven by something else. And I think what is driven by is that disdain for people's right to know. All right? And the other thing, in addition to that, is the fact that they know that at the end of the day, whatever nonsense they say, their supporters are going to repeat that nonsense as though it's the truth. And you know,
that it covers and makes it right.
It makes it right.
Okay.
Oh, listen to the president's explanation. Listen to the vice president, Mr. Greenwich explanation, and so on, as though that makes it right. If you collect money, and people already, they're waiting to call you a thief because they're thieves. And they know that you got the goods on them, but they want an opportunity to make you look bad also. Why are you going to play into their hands? By hiding money? No, you don't intend to thief the money, right? But you're hiding it. What are you hiding it for? You know? Oh, you're hiding from Venezuela? What is hidden from Venezuela? What kind of nonsense is that, as you see? But I think that we've got to drum it in our leaders' ears that the business of government is public business. That part of why we resented those who are now sitting in opposition is because they treated government business as their personal business. And we put you all there to do differently. And you must do differently. And if you are going to do differently, your own supporters must ensure that you do differently. And that is what I think part of my role, our role is to try to say to our supporters, we will do ourselves a good turn in the long run if we try as much as we can and use the power at our disposal to ensure that our politicians are not tempted, our leaders are not tempted to walk down that road. And so that's the bonus thing. The WPA wrote, we are partners. We wrote to the government and said, don't be secretive, release that contract. If they had listened to us as partners and released that contract, logically, they would also have had to release the information that look, these people give me a bonus. They push us around, blah, 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 blah. I think it took over a year before they actually met with us, and so on and so forth. Now, as members of the WPA, you know that we had frank discussions inside of our executive, and we realized that it would come to this if you don't release it. You know, now here we are, you know, having to sit back and to say, but you know, we tell you so.
Yeah, but the thing hurt a lot of people, man. I was speaking to, and this is an Indian lawyer, all right, who was very active against the PPP during their time. And he was saying, you know, man, he is so hurt. You could feel the hurt in him. That I practically like he want cussing her. That the same thing you fight against the PPP for.
Yeah.
You know? The same kind of, even whether they want to say that they're putting the money for Venezuela or whatever, make it public or what? Call Jagdio, say, well, look, this is what this money is for. We're going to put it somewhere or the other, so that the avenue for making it appear as though it's something clandestine and with some bad intent, that you could have erased that, right? But so many people are hurt by the frequent, I don't know whether they're lapses that are being made, that you have to continuously defend, that it really, you know, tells us that. And part of it is the lack of consultation with the parties that are part of the coalition. And we've been arguing all the time that the government, there seems to be some view that the government is the government, and the parties that make up this government are separated apart. Is that good thinking and politically?
It's bad thinking. And it's, as you say, from my estimation, from your estimation, from our estimation, it's one of the root causes of the problem. Because it is the parties that feed the government with its intelligence, feed the government with its content, feed the government with its ideological direction. The government is an administrative arm. The cabinet is not your think tank. The cabinet is not where you trash out ideas and there's a concourse of ideas and you argue. The cabinet is a place where you manage the day-to-day affairs of government. The thing about the strategy and the tactics and whether it is wrong or right to do that, whether this is the right time to release the information, it has to be done at the level of the parties. Because it's the parties that, create the overall vision and say to the government, you operate within the context of this vision. But for reasons which has to do with dominance of the big parties, meaning the PNC and the AFC, it's okay for them to operate in government. You see, at the level of the government, the AFC is a big fish. You know, it got 6 ministers, 8 ministers. The PNC is a big fish. They must get about 12, 13 ministers. So if you operate at that level, they're big. Parties like the WPA got 1 minister.
Half.
Or half, right? You know? And so therefore, at that level, parties like us don't wield the power. And so it is at the level of the APNU that a party like the WPA is able to do that, and that's real. I turned up at the funeral there of the little boy in our village. They won the little boys the other day. And young people, these are 18, 19, because it's their funeral. And they mobbed me and said, Dr. Hines, you are not fighting for us. I said, who you all? People like you and Sordian and Mr. Wilson, referring to the activists, the PNC and WPA activists in the village. And I say, but we fight for you all every day. But we are not the ones who are ministers. I have to stop there and try to give them a civic lesson and to say we try, but we don't have the wherewithal. You see, I did not convince them. I knew I didn't convince them. Because their thing is that you all are all part of this thing here. And they're not doing anything for us. The president comes here to Buxton. He comes and he shares toys and he goes away. He doesn't walk through the village as he used to do before he was president. He doesn't come here and talk to, this is what they're telling me.
Yeah, you know, one of the things, the president went once to some activity at, I can't remember what it was, but he drove through the line and drove down the Middle Walk Road. You know the guys at the, what we call Spliff Street?
Mm-hmm.
Those guys actually went onto the road, ready to wave and to greet and to shake the guy's hands. And the man passed with the windows wound up and the sirens. And them banners cuss, I tell you. They cuss out. And some of the nasty words that they use because they say, you know, because before you acted in one way, they could have greeted you, met you. They had that kind of connection and affinity. But here they are waiting. They knew that he was going to pass, and they were hopeful and expectant that they would be able to greet. And man, some of the language that you heard.
I can imagine. I can imagine.
So we gotta understand how we relate to people and the kind of how people view us, and we cannot become aloof and withdrawn from the society that created us. Right? We always have to remember that those very people we gotta go back to when the right time comes for us to be back in power.
Yes. How is it that WPA activists like myself and yourself, we have to tell the people, but we have no influence on what's going on?
Well, that's the problem. That's because people call you every time on their phone.
Because they think that you have influence.
You could do something for them.
And you have absolutely no influence, because the place at the level of the organs of the APNU where you can go and think, those they don't work. The last APNU meeting was in July. We should have met every 2 months. We haven't met since then.
The fact is, we can't even help ourselves.
You know?
Because we you know our situation where we have applied for certain things that really should be bequeathed to us because of the positions we hold. And even up to now, we can't even get that for our own selves. Right?
So that's the difficulty.
So,
you know, to the young lady who said to me, big man, your party's part of the coalition. I hope she's watching this program.
Yeah, so it's a disappointing thing because you have no recourse. You can't speak to anybody to say, well, look, man, these young people in Boxing every day, even at the level of the council, I mean, the situation there is that, you know, this thing is hogged by these PNC acolytes. And you get a sense that nobody's going down to see what is happening. And so every day you're on the road, walking sore, you're the chairman, you ain't get nothing. You know, but it's one ring of people since the former chairman there who was getting all the contracts, and that ring has not broken.
Yeah.
Right? And the attempts to change that is met with every resistance and fight down and you know. So it got to be broken.
Yeah.
Other people are asking every day for some kind of relief.
Yeah.
But these people are so entrenched, and they believe that, you know, because they're the big party in the coalition, that this is how it must go and nobody can change it, and so, right?
Dion, let me tell you something. The layers of voters for this coalition better wise up. You got PNC voters. You have AFC voters. You got APNU voters. You have coalition voters. We have 4 layers of voters. They think it's us PNC voters. They got some young people who have not been socialized as PNC. They understand APNU. They were 18 in 2011, the first time they voted, and all they know is APNU, and they relate to APNU. They came into this thing, they relate to this thing because APNU. There was another group that came on board in 2015 who came on board because of the coalition. So you have coalition voters, you have APNU voters, and of course you have the diehard PNC voters, and I'm sure the AFC still have some of their voters there. I would not say WPA voters because they say we not get vote, we don't have voters. But I can tell you that those APNU voters and coalition voters, in their heads, that's why they come to you and me on the road, because they think they're voting for us also. They weren't voting for PNC and AFC. They're voting for APNU and the coalition. And they feel that we are part of it and that we are supposed to be wielding power on their behalf and to bring relief to them. And this government has been, they better wise up and understand the dynamics with that we're dealing with.
Well, you know, so these are, I mean, it's something that is tragic, and we really got to, I am hopeful that, you know, we can establish institutions that would allow for the views of people who are on the ground, like me.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
who every day got to face the people, and they come to you, feel real bad. A guy would call me on the phone and say, man, look, in the Ministry of Education, things are terrible. I used to get little contracts and so on, but now this new whoever that is in charge, they're taking away everything and they're giving it to their friend. See what you could do for me. Who you going to go and talk to?
That's right.
You're ashamed for say bye.
Yeah.
They ain't got a soul that you could go and tell anything because nobody is there to listen.
Yeah.
Right?
No,
But people believe that you have, because you're here, they understood your role in the coalition. They believe that you have some, and I big people, not only from the parties outside the PNC people who are there, who fought, feel as ostracized as we are. So what we see happening is just a clique of people now hugging and excluding everybody else.
And 3/4 of them ain't been nowhere wrong when blows the sharing.
That's the point.
Right. This is part of the decay of our politics, decay of the society, and I think we've got to be frank about it. I mean, people sometimes don't like us to be frank about it. There's an uneasiness that you don't, you know, young PNC people sometimes tell me don't wash your dirty linen in public, but I can't wash it in private, you know?
And they ain't even listening when you
Right. So, but the society has to be alerted. I think we have to have a clean conscience, right? I say to people every day, I go to bed at night knowing that when an African government was in power and did nonsense, we put our lives on the line and said no. When an Indian government was in power and did nonsense, we put our lives on the line and said no. And an African government has come back to power, and we are doing the same thing. You go to sleep at night with a knowing that you did what is right. Now, I understand that people are apprehensive about the return of the PPP. Oh my God, I am. I think they'll throw people like me and you in jail the next day if they come to power. So we understand the danger of the PPP coming back to power, and so therefore to do as much as we can to ensure that that does not happen. But that should not mean that we cultivate another bad regime in order to keep out another one. I think that's where I think, for me, and I will argue within the WPA, that we've got to draw the line. We cannot, in our quest to keep bad people out of government, cultivate an equally bad a regime, and we run the risk of doing that.
Yeah, it comes back to haunt you.
We run the risk of doing that if we do not deal with some of our frailties. Here's hoping that after our Christmas break, we drink some real ginger beer and put sense in the head, and some of the black cake gets something inside of the pepper pot that puts some sense in our heads, because 2018 is going to be definitive. It's clear that oil is coming, but we're not going to be controlling that oil. That is clear. It is clear that we don't have a clear strategy yet about how we're going to deal with this oil. The question for countries like Guyana, when we hit on luck like we have hit on with oil, is how do we organize ourselves as a country and institutions in the country to squeeze as much as we can for ourselves. It's a struggle. We know, let's not quarrel. Big companies are going to get the most of it. That's the lay of the land. That's how things are.
And the IMF has identified here that,
yes,
oil agreement with Exxon is not the best.
It's not the best. And so we've got to put ourselves in a position to get as much as we can for the people of Guyana. It is not, the oil is not on land. The oil is offshore. And so it's about getting those revenues and investing those revenues in other areas of the economy that can benefit the country and that can reduce unemployment among especially our young people. When you look around and you see the way in which our young people are killing themselves on the roads, on the dance halls, young women are being killed randomly, wantonly. It must tell us something. It is not that those individuals who do it are bad. We must wake up to the point that there is a crisis in the society and where you lose in our young people because we are not at the level of policy embracing them. It's okay to take a little child and say, I give you a scholarship so you can go to school. That's one child. What we need are policies that are aimed at embracing those young people. And that's what we are not seeing. Real policy. We hear all the numbers. And we hear that you can't give this set of worker this and you can't give this set of worker that and so on. What we do not hear are policies that are aimed at saving those young people. They're drifting and they're drifting. They're becoming dangerous to themselves, dangerous to the rest of the society, and this society is going to explode. It already is beginning to explode in a way that we can't control. I don't have to tell them. You teach them every day. You teach them every day.
I mean, I made the same point that you were making at the funeral the preceding day on the Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
And I did point out that, because most of them are part of some group called LCC, which we don't even know what it is about.
Mm-hmm.
And what I speak to the youngsters to try to get, and there seems to be two meanings to the group. One is love, care, and comfort, but the other one, they're not telling you what it.
Right.
They're not telling you what that other meaning. They're telling me that, well, if there's where you know, well, you stick with that. Another youngster told me that. I said, what is this group about? He said, it's a set of stupid young people. I said, what is their agenda? He said, raving, which means it's just about wildness and reckless behavior and being raucous and so on. And, he was positive enough to say he don't be a part of stupidness.
Right.
But there is a set of them who would get together in these buses and go on the car park, and they are loud and aggressive, and they drink and they carry on, and then they get in the buses, the music is loud, and they tear down the road, and it's really
it's out of control. I tell you, Dion, they're not doing anything that you and I didn't do as boys. What is different is that when you and I were boys, the society said, well, you can't go past it. Right? There were checks and balances within the communities, within the families, within the extended family, that your badness got a limit, right? The thing is that they're no longer barriers in the society. And the society has abandoned these young people at the structural level, but also in the communities for their own safety. Big people don't want to talk to them.
To the young people.
So we're in a bad way. We have a ministry of social cohesion. There are a lot of uncohesiveness within our communities that ministry need to be dealing with. But if the ministry is just another bureaucracy with a minister and people who read 2 books and conflict resolution and really not dealing with the real problems of the society, we're in trouble.
I mean, the nature of the group itself, because it's so distinctive. 3 of them died in an accident at Michael, and how many miles away at Triumph? One who should have been at that activity
died.
She ended up dead.
Yeah.
Right, and the peculiar thing about this group is that when these youngsters die, they get their white jerseys, they put their faces on, and then they have a bacchanalia at the funeral, which, as though death is something
it's an honor.
It's an honor. You celebrate it, and then they wait for the next one to die and carry on the same way. So it seems as though there is no meaning to life anymore for this set of young people. And I was reading on Facebook one of my former students asking what they, and he used a cuss word, they're so good about that a funeral could be lit. You know, when I say a funeral is lit, what I mean is
jumping.
Yeah,
right.
So he's saying, I mean, somebody dead and this fool putting up on Facebook that the funeral was lit. You understand what I'm saying?
No, we've got to rescue those young people. They didn't get there on their own, Dion.
Right.
They got there because the society abandoned them. And it's a point, we reach a point where the society can't do anything about it. The society in itself becomes, cowers in the presence of
the young people.
This, what is
they have
going
taken
on
over,
here.
you know.
Yes, and I hope those who are in power, who have the authority to do policy, really put a human face to politics. You know, the politics of numbers, the politics of things, what I call otherworldly language. And it's not about people. You know, a couple of years ago, 40% they said 40% of young people are unemployed. I don't think it moved anybody in power. 40% of your young people in power, you know what you're playing there with? It's a state of emergency. That is a state of emergency, and the fact that we did nothing about it, we just allow it to go and so on. We are reaping what we sow, and we've got to have the wherewithal to put an end to it, and not to put an end to it by force or dissing the young people, but put an end to it by policies of embrace of young people.
Well, I'm hopeful that, you know, some transformation. I didn't, you know, what goes through my head is that we need some kind of intervention, and I intend to speak to all the religious groups in the community, Buxton in particular, because this thing is happening too regularly, so that they can come together and have maybe some kind of religious intervention, you know, and some night of prayer or something, because we got to start somewhere.
Yes.
To begin to address this. We can't be losing this asset that we have to, you know, recklessness on the road and to murder and these kinds of things. Even the young school teacher who died 22 years of age, one person was asking what was she doing on the road at that hour of the morning. What we had our time. We used to be on the road too. You're 22.
Nothing is wrong with being on the road.
We used to travel from Buxton to Melanie to Victor, wherever they got dance and anything. We just there, you know what I mean?
Yeah. But it's the thing about you know, the victim.
Yeah.
You know, it's about blaming the victim,
right,
and not taking responsibility as a society. That there is something about the road that is unsafe. There's something about the psyche of young men and older men today that don't feel that a young woman life means anything. That's where the problem is. It's not that she was on the road at 2 o'clock in the morning. Okay. So we're putting the blame at the wrong place. But that happens when a society refuses to see how it has allowed itself to go down a road of despair and decay. And when it gets out of hand, it's somebody else's problem.
Okay, for 2018, maybe in closing off, what are your projections? What are your views, and whether you have any optimism?
Well, I've got to be optimistic. As much as I said to friends these past couple of weeks, I just feel deflated, because you see in part of all you're trying to do blowing up in front of your face. But I've got to be optimistic. We've got to come back next year, and we've got to keep doing what we've been doing, and try at the level of the institutions to get those in power to act differently. But we also have to intervene in our communities and continue to push and to do small things. I hate to say 2017 we said was a make or break year, but it break us a lot. Hopefully 2018 will not break us that much, and that we will do a little bit more making in 2018.
Okay, Doc. Well, thank you for being on the program. It's always a pleasure having you, and I'm hopeful that people will understand what you are trying to do, what I'm trying to do here. That's not that we want to tear down this government. We have the APNU, AFC at heart, and we are affected immensely by things that they do that really we have to continually defend. And we're hopeful that the mechanisms can be put in place so that the concerns that we share can be shared at the level of the decision making, so that people can begin to, at least get some kind of feedback. Well, at least I talk to this body and this is what I say.
Yeah.
Well, you can't talk to nobody.
Right.
So you can't say anything.
Yeah.
Right? But it's been a pleasure being with you. I look forward to being with you again next week. Same time, same channel for another program of Walter Rodney Groundings. Remember, you eat, you drink, you be merry, but be safe. On our roads, be safe in whatever you do, all right? We don't want any more tragedies over this weekend, over the holidays. Live to see a new year, and be good to yourselves. Do have a good night.
From the bottomless pit, but my